The famous refresh. The famous refresh. Can I have a refresh? Can
Right?
I have a refresh?
Right?
Just like a button, you just like push, and all of a sudden everything is, whoo, your your health is at full, your sanity is at full, your stomach, your everything. We're just starting right out the gate today.
I know, right? No, I feel you because I think that everything is, just started as we were talking before we're getting on, but just a lot of, kind of things, exciting things for sure, but that definitely brings on a lot of extra work and stress and feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, yeah, and the time change, like I know there's so many conversations about the time
I
change
didn't even remember that.
and everything. It's you didn't remember there's a time change? You're
No.
here on time. Good thing, good thing the certain devices just automatically update, right? Because
Yeah.
we might be like totally off. Although I have a couple clients in Arizona and in the area where they don't change, and
Yep.
so they're a little messed up today with trying to figure out when to meet with me,
Yeah.
because my time changed, but theirs didn't. So, anywho, hi.
How was your Halloween? Because I know that we decided to not stream that day,
Yeah,
just so that people can enjoy the day and everything.
yeah, the kids. They're at the point where they didn't trick or treat. One of them wanted to, but I don't really know what happened. The person they were going to go with, I don't understand. I don't get all the details. But during the day, there were events that they did, and so they had a lot of fun doing that. And I hope everybody else did some fun things for Halloween. I live in an area where we don't get trick or treaters just because we're in the middle of nowhere and
Hmm.
there aren't any kids on our street. But uh, but everybody I know just had gobs of candy and lots of kids coming, so it's nice to see all that happening this year when last year was a little iffy.
Hmm.
So, how about you?
It was pretty good. We didn't get as many this year as we did last year, so that was pretty interesting. But having
Hmm.
those, big fur babies, they go crazy with the kids. So,
Oh, yeah, they do. We are preparing. I know I've mentioned it before. We're preparing to head out tomorrow to the big AWE conference
hmm,
in California. So I'll be in your state
yeah,
sometime late tomorrow. Um, it's a long drive,
yeah,
uh, but nowhere near you, unfortunately. Just the same state, but it's pretty exciting, and I can't wait to come back with
right.
whatever's new and exciting and happening there that I can share with all of our audience. So that's pretty exciting. Um, the other things, you got a brand new computer, so
Hmm.
you are all spiffed up over there, getting everything all put back together and set up. It's exciting, right? But then you have to make sure you have all the programs, make sure you have all the settings set the way you want. If they didn't transfer over, then all your passwords and all your everything. So it's a big endeavor
Hmm.
words.
Yeah, you think you have everything like set up and good to go. I was just sitting there and it hit me last night, and I'm like, well, great, I'm gonna have to hook it up. But I use an external hard drive to pull all of my files, and then plug it in a
Yeah,
new one. So I thought I had everything, and then I sitting there late last night, and I'm like, you know what? I forgot to get all the stream VODs off of there. Awesome. So I'm gonna
I think I might need those tomorrow.
right. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to hook that back up and take those down so that we can continue to get those edited and put up on the YouTube. So, but that I was like, I thought I had everything, but it's because those were all kind of scattered in a certain part of my drive, and I just forgot to grab them all. So I was like, oh man, here we go.
Pretty exciting that we'll be able to get, because we have a pretty good content library at this point. It's pretty
Hmm.
exciting that you'll be able to get that up on YouTube so that people who aren't on Twitch or don't want to be on yet one more thing, they can access it there. So that's pretty exciting. I don't think we have the early ones, but um, we're more than a half a year into this.
I
I want to
know.
say we're coming up on a
Exciting.
year. That's not really true. We still have about a quarter left, but it's pretty cool. We've talked about a lot of exciting things, and today we have even more to talk about. All the announcements that have been going on. Not necessarily the topic of the conversation, but for people who are listening, the Animal Crossing update dropped
Hmm.
early, so that was kind of exciting for people who have played. I haven't played in a really long time, and I went in because on our game night Friday night, people wanted to check out this new update, so I went in there for that and had to kill all the cockroaches in my house. And, uh, so um, other than that, the whole enormous slash not enormous, I don't know, like it is big, and then at the same time we talked about it weeks ago. We knew it was coming. The meta whole
Hmm.
thing with Facebook. But I'll say within all of that, uh, I'm most excited about the fact that for the Oculus, people soon won't need to be required to have a Facebook account. Now,
Hmm.
having said that, the caveat for me though is I really don't trust or believe that Facebook is just saying, "Oh, that was not the way we intended, or not the idea that we had, or something. So we're going to rescind that." I just I just don't trust that. I feel like it's going to be, well, you don't have to have a Facebook account, but now you have to have a Meta account,
Hmm.
or you don't have to have this, but now you have to do that. It's still going to be. I cannot believe that they're going to disconnect
Hmm.
that entirely. So while it's exciting on one hand, because one of the concerns I've had about using a Quest clinically is that it is connected. You have to have a Facebook account. Now on my Quest 1, that was prior to having to have that. And maybe even, I can't remember now. No, I think we have a couple Quest 2, and we have a couple because we program for it, right? So we program the virtual sand tray,
Hmm.
virtual reality program, and then we do trainings and things like that. So we have to have multiples. And I think all of them are connected to Facebook. So I think it was the Oculus One, and that was really nice. But then all of a sudden they were like, "Oh no, you have to have your Facebook account connected, or have a Facebook account to connect to it." So in my teachings, I tell people, well, think about that, because
Hmm.
even if the whoever you're playing with doesn't have access to your Facebook account, there's an interconnectedness in there that we as therapists, we're trying to keep things interconnected within the session in ways that are important clinically, and then completely disconnected in other ways, right? For confidentiality reasons and whatnot. And so I've been instructing people, certainly make what I call a dummy account, like in terms of it's not really your Facebook account. It's a separate account with maybe a different name, or your username, or whatever it is, and utilize that. Um, and of course, friending and unfriending your clients when you're using VR with them. So we'll just have to see in so many ways what all this means. And I see a lot of people. It's funny because I've mentioned before the supernatural program that I have been exercising with, and there's a Facebook group, like there are a few of them, but one in particular is a pretty active community and talking about these things, and they were all talking about Facebook buying Supernatural, and
Hmm.
there had to have been a connection in the first place because it's so close to Beat Saber in some ways, that and Facebook owns Beat Saber,
Hmm.
right? They bought it, I don't know, however long ago. So I was sitting there going, how would you, if Supernatural launched and they didn't have a connection to Facebook or Beat Saber, Oculus, or something under the huge conglomeration, then they would have been sued like crazy.
Hmm.
they're already connected, and everyone's like, oh no, we can't use it now because I don't know. It's really interesting, the whole thing. I don't know how it's going to pan out, but what are your thoughts on the Meta announcement, and what you think that means as it spreads out in a whole bunch of different directions?
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating. I think the biggest, I guess, description that that I felt just resonated in terms of like simplicity and understanding is it's almost like creating the internet, like a whole new internet, basically. It's like a Web3 internet that people are essentially calling. But Facebook, or I guess Meta at this point, is also discussing opening physical stores. So they want to actually have people to be able to have the ability to come in and test out virtual reality and augmented reality. So that's something that they're discussing. But it's just, it's like, I think I read, and we talked about it a long time ago, but months ago, but they talked about Nvidia, opening the metaverse for, or their omniverse that they have, but they're more doing it for like business and enterprises and training and things like that. Once I saw that they, said that they were like, they heavily believe in the metaverse and omniverse for a whole wide variety of things, social experiences, business, meetings. Like I saw a new company now has basically opened up a virtual office because they were all doing remote work anyways, and so now they have a virtual office inside of like a skyscraper. And so it
Mm-hmm.
sounds very like just different for a lot of people and hard to grasp, and that's perfectly okay. But when we talk about that it's coming and everything, it's like I saw it, and then now we see Microsoft, last week, boom, we're going to go ahead and, if people are familiar with Teams, kind of like a Zoom kind of thing, Teams is moving into like a metaverse and digital avatars. They're going to be making all of their games, or a majority of them. I don't know if they're all of them, but they said, new games will be on the Xbox, will be metaverse games and apps. And so now you got Microsoft. Now, like Ubisoft is talking about it. EA Sports is talking about it. So, Square Enix, all of these gaming companies are starting to talk about metaverse, NFTs, blockchain gaming, all of these things that's really shifting the whole, gaming mindset that I think is it's really interesting because we're trying to just help people understand the basics of gaming, and it's already like swapping to something completely different. And
Right.
there's crazy money in it. Like, just looking at Facebook, they said they're going to be investing 10 billion into this space. They have 10,000 employees working on virtual reality and augmented reality. And for some context, that's that's more than double Twitter's entire company. Um, Facebook said they're also looking to hire 10,000 additional more people in just Europe alone for like virtual reality and augmented reality. So,
Yeah.
this is going to be something that like I think if people are resistant against it, sure, that's totally fine. You don't have to like it, but to think that this isn't something that's coming or it hasn't already been here is, that they're behind the times on it.
Well, and I feel like that's a lot of what we've talked about for years is this is not going away.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's part of this that's been very hard for me to wrap my head around clinically, that I feel like we as a field, psychology in general, and then you add on top of it the specialty that we have of play therapy, that we have a responsibility to look forward and to see as much as we can what's coming, and then to have educated and thoughtful conversations and explorations about what that means for our field and our clients and our work. Because otherwise, we are behind before we even started.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, what you just said. Because I'm sitting here thinking about this topic, and when we talked about metaverse, and there are still people like I can't even believe this, but someone told me just recently that somebody reached out to them and was basically like, how how do you do play therapy through telehealth? It's like, well, where have you been for the last 2 years? Like, even if you weren't actively doing it, there has been so much conversation about it. There have literally been books written about it. I know because I wrote one. um, it's flabbergasting to me how
Mhm.
people could be 2 years into this, like we're just about on 2 years into this, and be just now thinking, how do you do that?
Mhm.
So, and whatever, they have their reasons. Maybe they were sick and out of it. Maybe, who knows? There could be very valid reasons for that, and it's really not the point to pick on somebody who's
Mhm.
asking. I'm glad they're asking. My gosh, good. Ask, read, consult, get supervised, practice, experiment, all that kind of stuff. And if we're talking about these next steps of like metaverse and digital avatars and the different kinds of meeting spaces and whatnot, I feel like we have started behind already, because I know I've been talking about this for a long time and looked at like I had three heads, and now here we are. And so it's like, okay, how do we not only grasp and explore and come up with parameters and understandings and value and all that about the fundamentals, and not get years and years behind on what's coming next,
Mhm.
which is part of the reason we're talking about it. So some people listening might be like, metaverse, what the hell are they talking about? What are you talking about? Like, that's so foreign, I can't even incorporate it. But part of what I'm saying, and I think you're saying too, is we have a responsibility not to do that. We have a responsibility to say, let's figure out what this is, and what the possible ramifications and ripple effect will be, so that we aren't blindsided by it,
Mhm.
and that we also don't have a larger divide between our clients and ourselves, because our clients, many of them, will be much more well versed and immersed and have the next generations of whatever's coming interwoven into their daily existence. And for the therapists who don't understand any of that, have blocked it out, have ignored it, have refused it, have whatever, think of how big that divide ends up getting,
Mhm.
right?
It's
Am I
already happening, even,
making sense?
like it's been happening for years, you know what I mean? It's like exactly what you said. I love the interwoven part, because you think about like it really hit me, when I was thinking about it in my head, where I was thinking, especially when I was reflecting on the Microsoft news. It's like, we've moved away from just virtual reality and augmented reality and just gaming in general, or consoles and whatnot, and PC gaming and stuff for um, entertainment, to the children that are growing up now. This may actually be what their workplace is. So it's not even just
Yes,
entertainment, but this is going to be their career. When I was thinking about
exactly.
Microsoft Teams and digital avatars, so like all of these, kids that we see now, this is actually possibly going to be, especially within the next 5 to 6 years, because even if you reject it, it's like once you have the top companies start throwing tons and tons of money in, then they start restricting. All of our meetings are only going to be done through Teams, or in a virtual space, and so all the companies beneath them have to adapt, and then the company, it's a trickle down. And
Yeah.
so it's like, even if you don't believe in it, it's coming. And like you said, just it's going to be so interwoven in their daily lives. Of course there's going to be jobs and everything that won't be done virtually, but adding to the beginning point with like parameters and boundaries. Just reading a former like Google employee who was basically saying, the concern is that people may get lost in a digital world because it's better than the physical world. It's a much better experience, and so that's one of their concerns. And I think that is valid, you know, like if you just have someone who's just, you know, unregulated and, you know, just sitting there and not doing the things they need to be doing, you know, in terms of functioning, then yeah, that can be a problem. But I think that, you know, speaks to the point of what you're saying. Like, why aren't we having these conversations about parameters and boundaries and getting past this whole like, no, 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 this can't be a thing? Because it's moved from this can't be a thing to this is a thing. And you're looking at like a big old boulder in the street and you can't just move around it anymore to keep going forward.
Right. And as I am belaboring for sure at this point, for us not to attend to that and to have those important conversations, I mean, in my opinion, it's unethical.
Mm-hmm.
Because ethically, we are responsible for many, many things, including um, being knowledgeable
Mm-hmm.
about what the things that are impacting our clients. And this is certainly one of them.
I think that's a great way of saying it. I'm excited and scared. I think that's like the best thing that like anyone can say, you know, when it comes to this whole time.
Yeah. I know that I've said before in my experience in virtual reality that in some, I don't know, like in a segment of my experience in virtual reality, is that like presenting in virtual reality, I actually prefer it
Mm-hmm.
to presenting, say, over Zoom. I feel like each one of us is actually there. I can see, as I think I talked about even last time when we met 2 weeks ago, even in that Halloween, you know, haunted mansion experience that a couple of us went into, that even just looking over when I was scared at my friend whose avatar is there and seeing her eyes like looking at me, like that was much more. I felt like we were really in the same space.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a different experience than I would have if we were like looking at it in 2D on the computer screen and could still see and hear each other. When I've presented, when as all of you know, I move my hands around a lot when I talk, and so even in presenting, my hands are moving when I'm moving my hands, and my mouth is moving, and my body's moving around, and I can see everybody else's, and that to me is a more immersive connecting experience than say what we're doing right now. And this is even less so because I can't see you because of the way that Zoom and your system works together, is that I'm on the screen but you aren't in the Zoom thing, so I don't even see you except if I have my Twitch window open. But the point is that it makes sense to me because of those experiences that to move into something where we have our avatars interacting has other elements and dimensions to it than what we've been doing now, and may feel for a lot of people like you are having a closer to in-person experience
Mm-hmm.
than what we're currently doing with teleconferencing and whatnot. But and I think that's all fantastic. Obviously, I think it's fantastic. I talk about it. I get excited about it. I'm starting a new cohort of my virtual reality series today, and I'm super excited to talk to people about it. So clearly, I'm excited about it. But we also need to talk about all the sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
It is multifaceted, and it makes me think of, oh God, the movie just popped in my head, and it was at WALL-E, wasn't it WALL-E, where the people are all in the chairs and they're
Yeah.
all just and we also don't want to lose sight
Mm-hmm.
of a lot of important things about life as it was prior to this. So that those are the conversations to have, and those aren't hating conversations or hailing conversations in either direction. It's how do we as a field responsibly and ethically work with these mediums in our sessions.
Mm-hmm. I love the point that that Obs was making, where Zoom feels very fake and very much like I'm put on a spot. I think that goes side by side with the point that you're making and being in VR. Like I know there's times where like I'll be sitting in a meeting on Zoom and just having the camera on me just feels uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
I would rather just have it turned off, and I think a lot of people really resonate with that with the work from home. It's like, man, I don't have to get up and spend all this time like getting ready just so I look nice when I'm at work and stuff. And the reality is like, yeah, like, who cares? Maybe some days you just had a rough day, you're tired, you're out of energy, and you don't want to have to like look, pretty and cute and everything for the camera. As long as you're up and you're doing your work, like that's all that matters, and
But it opens up into a whole nother conversation, doesn't it? In
mm-hmm,
with all of what we're talking about, it opens up into, for me, the the amount of judgment,
mm-hmm,
assumptions, whatnot that we make based on somebody's external.
exactly.
And all those studies that they've done over the years of which person is smarter, which person is more whatever it is, right? And typically, like the ones that have been done with children in particular, but I think it would translate into many adults as well, is typically there is a certain look, there's a
Mm-hmm,
certain level of attractiveness, there's a certain like symmetry to the facial construction and whatnot that contributes to somebody saying that person is smarter or that person is more well equipped for something or whatever. It's going to be really fascinating to see how that shifts
mm-hmm,
over time, because if we see the person less and less and less in their physical form or in their made up form or whatever, then are we, and I think we touched on this some other stream that we did long ago, but is there, what other components of that person's characteristics, of the skills that they bring to the table, like I am me, and I have what I have to say and what I have to think and what I can offer, and what I wonder and all of that, whether I'm wearing a torn up t-shirt and ducky jammy pants as I am if I'm wearing a nice dress and some heels.
mm-hmm.
Like I'm still me and I'm still bringing the same thing to the table. So it's this all has a very big potential for people to reduce the amount that they judge on the external and increase. I'm hoping for humankind that we increase in who the person actually is. It's kind of like now there's an end point to that, but it's kind of like even in online dating,
Mm-hmm.
is that, and there's pros and cons. I'm not saying this is all rosy either, but in some ways you get to learn more about the person and who they are and how they interact with you and how they listen or don't and how they support or don't and things like that, rather than purely their physical attributes. Now that gets more complicated, right? Because you want to have attraction,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a lot of other components to that for sure. And there are people who lie, and I just watched a movie, lighthearted kind of rom-commy kind of movie with my daughter last night about someone who got catfished
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So certainly that stuff happens, and that's not the side of it I mean, but I mean more actually interacting with people based on characteristics other than superficiality, I think has a lot of value. And I would really love to be involved in some studies that start looking at that and longitudinally to see how that shifts over time. So
Yeah,
if
it's
anybody,
really interesting
yeah.
because I think, it's like that was such a perfect, explanation. I think bringing like the online dating and to even take that a step further, it's like, the online gaming community. It's like we care more about the skills, like you're saying, and who people are. So, like when you're playing and you're trying to like beat something, you want to be able to work with that person, you want to succeed with that person. You obviously hope that person has skills so that you can beat certain challenges. But even if you don't, I mean, like there's plenty of people that like, there's plenty of games I played with people where like I wasn't that great when it came to skill, and then there's times where like I played and I was a little bit better than the people that I would play with. It didn't matter. We cared more about people's personalities than anything else. It was never about, like I can't even, and I know Obs has played a lot too, but like I can't imagine a time where it's like, oh, let's just excuse this person's terrible behavior because they look, awesome in real life, no, because like you don't know what that other person looks like, right? And so it's fascinating because it's like, I think everything you're saying just leads more to that point of, this is why these conversations need to be had. How do you have healthy friendships and connections with people, but make sure you're not getting catfished or putting yourself in harm's way, like giving out personal details and things like that. So, I think it's, um, but, it really is just one of those things where I think that is it really makes me wonder, I guess, like on a deeper level of, is gaming actually potentially better in terms of social skills than in person, right? Because like when we do see people in person, we do have those inherent judgments that we already have developed,
Yeah.
stereotypes through experiences, through, environments, families, everything growing up, that we already, look at certain people a certain way. We don't want to play with them, whatever it may be. And what is it like if they were to have a digital social experience first, growing up on that, and then the secondary being going to school and everything? I know there's a research study that they did in Taiwan, I believe it was, where they had a bunch of like kids who they claimed were antisocial, I believe was the word. Basically, they struggled with social skills, and they measured, how significant and everything. And instead of the status quo of just shoving more kids out into physical social experiences, these were, quote unquote gamers. What they did was they actually put them into a social like MMORPG guild together. I know we've talked about this, but they had them come up with rules and who's gonna, be the crafter and who's gonna be the leader of the raid and how do we come to decisions on who's gonna get what item, and basically just this whole experience. And they ran it for I believe a couple months, and they actually saw that what they used the word psychological capital. So why don't we take what they're good at and introduce more social skills into it in a very strict structured environment, and see what happens. And they found that they actually became more confident in themselves and built the self-esteem, that they became more social outside at school or in physical experiences. And it's like, what a novel concept.
Which is what, for sure, multiple arenas have been saying for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even the tabletop RPG players and Dungeons and Dragons and all of that, they've been saying that for a really long time now. That, of course, is not always, because you can do a lot digitally at this point, but historically that's in person and not a video game. But just as an example, and then you go into League of Legends and World of Warcraft and all those kind of massive games that people do have different roles. And I know we've talked about this a number of times in the stream of not only what roles are they attracted to, what part do they play on the team, how do they fulfill that role or not, how do they engage, how do they handle when there are difficult situations, stressful things, all of that. It's just so ripe and rich. One, for baseline information and knowledge as the therapist of what's going on with that person, and then on top of it, really ripe and rich with possibilities of psychoeducation, of interventions, of different experiences, of things to try out. Of it's it, it's I don't know. It's a unique experience for me, and I don't know about it for you, Michael, to be in the position of having said a lot of things for a lot of time, and then for it to now becoming more known. I don't even want to call, I don't even want to say mainstream within the psychology world, but like I think of the four people, I don't even want to say forefathers, the four people of virtual reality,
Mm-hmm.
and how decades ago, when people were starting to really realize the potential for this in so many different arenas, and yet the support wasn't there, the money wasn't there, the backing wasn't there, the software wasn't there, the hardware was cumbersome, as we talked about, really heavy and cumbersome and expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if you had it, the software available was so very limited. Like, you have to have key pieces in place to come together to be able to take off, and then when the more consumer based headsets started to become available, then there were some of those four people who were saying long ago, oh my gosh, this is amazing, who looked at that and said, oh, now we have an opportunity. If we can pull this stuff together, then this is going to take off.
Mm-hmm.
And those pieces, the history need to be in place so that those pieces could be in place so that these next pieces could be in place, which is the conversation we're having about meta and what that's really going to impact. I mean, we think about physical spaces for offices, right? As you were saying, that people have a virtual office in a virtual skyscraper building or whatever. And what is that? There's a trickle effect of that we're seeing through a lot of things we're doing in COVID these days, but the trickle effect into how does that affect ourselves as employees? How does that affect hours of work? How does that affect the workload? How does it affect how much people are paid? The equity of that, and then trickles down to how does it affect family life?
Mm-hmm.
How does it affect someone's internal existence of like, for me, I have a very fortunate position of I own my office building, so it's a house, and so I bought a house and turned it into my office, and then I obviously have my house that I live in, and there are days when I am more than happy to sit in my house where I live, my home, and work from there. I am comfortable. I don't have to get up. I don't have to go anywhere, all those things. And then there are other days where I'm like, oh, I really need to get out. And I come to my office and I basically do the same thing. I'm just in a different environment. And for me, that helps me because there are days when, there are days when you pop right out of bed. That doesn't happen to me very often. And then there are days when you want to stay under your covers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so depending on the day, I have the luxury of having the two environments that I can go into. And I know not everybody has that. But what about if you're working purely from home? And I know a lot of people have been, and you don't have another environment to go to. Like, what does that do for us psychologically, even internally? And then, of course, we think of how that affects, as I said earlier, our families, our clients, their families, education. Like, it goes out. And these are the important conversations, I think, to be having on a much larger scale than our little Twitch stream, so that we're going into things in an educated and thoughtful way, as opposed to a reactive way of, oh, we have this situation now we have to try to manage it. We can at least have some ideas about it ahead of time. And I think that's where the responsibility comes in as humans. And then when we narrow it down to what we're talking about in our work with our clients.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think there's obviously everyone's gonna have pros and cons to which situation they prefer, and I think that like the best thing is like if people had options, like the idea of like if people want to do hybrid, like, you know what, hey, like 2 days out of the week, like I want to go into the office, and in like 3 days I want to stay home and work from home,
Yep.
um, exactly what you're saying. Some people don't want that environment of working from home because it's too difficult. And some people would love to be able to work from home, to be able to have their own lunch break where they can go and cook their own food, save money that way, save money on having to commit to work, or just the peace of mind to know that, if something, your child got sick or something, you're just 5 minutes away as opposed to being an hour and a half away, whatever it may be. Just to think about how the benefit of that psychologically can make someone feel more comfortable and, like, I guess, effective working. And, I always laugh at the idea of, well, the person isn't, doing what they're supposed to be doing at home, and great. I think, like, I mean, when it comes down to business, if someone isn't getting something done, it doesn't matter where they are, if they're at home or if they're at work. That's something that you need to, look at as a manager, as an owner. Is this person fit for this job? Like, it's always blown my mind, because I think the concept applies to so many things. If someone is trying to get from point A to point B, it doesn't matter what path they take if they get there when there is a designated time, right? Like, if there's a deadline for work and you need to get this done and you don't get it done, that's on you. That's not on your boss, right? And it doesn't matter if you're remote or you're at home, right? That's your, responsibility. But to say, like, oh no, we need to have everyone in the office and everything, and I look at that as more of just like an ease of mind, maybe, for the people above, where it's like, oh, I just want to look and make sure that they're working. That makes me feel better. You know what I mean? But, like, there's a lot of people who I read during the pandemic who said, wow, yeah, I actually, like, because I work from home, I get up and get my work done so fast and everything, and can be done for the rest of the day. Whereas when I was at a physical location, I had to drive like 2 hours, and then I knew I had to be there for like 8 hours. So I procrastinated a lot more in the office just to kill time than I did when I was able to work from home. So it's like, wow, just imagine if you could just give someone the motivation to get done what they need to get done, and watch how effective they can be and how fast they can be with it, and how it benefits both parties.
And if there are pieces of that leave something unfulfilled, then why don't we address that piece? What I'm thinking about is, okay, so for instance, I've talked a couple of times about how last year two of my children were online schooled, right? And so because of the COVID stuff, before that they had been in traditional school. Now, the online program that they did, I did a lot of research. There are a lot of them out there. I tried to really understand what their needs were academically, and find a program that met that. That program was by far superior to the academic program that they have experienced in the district that I'm in. Hands down, by far, more complete, better handouts, more comprehensive instruction, more on your own pace. You get this, great, get through it, go on to the next thing. You don't get it, okay, here's some more ways to do it, here's some more help, here's some all of that kind of stuff. If I had to choose purely on academic rigor and offerings, hands down, that online program. Now, that was hard for my kids because they were, and for so many, I'm using as an example, certainly different experiences for different people. Sometimes it works beautifully for them and they've been online homeschool this whole time. For some, even the academics weren't any good. But for my kids, the social part was really missed. And they really wanted to be with other kids and not be home 24/7. And so now they're in school however many hours it is. It's like close to 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. They didn't spend nearly 8 hours a day doing schoolwork when they were in online school. They got in, they got done, they were, They finished it, they were done. They did it in a fraction of the amount of time, and potentially even got further and understood more concepts because of the system and the way that's set up. But because they miss that social so much, and there really aren't great ways to meet those needs in other ways. You can say, well, join a club or be part of a team or whatever it is, but that's not daily, and that's not, you're not getting the same kind of connection
Hmm.
necessarily that you do when you're in school 8 hours a day. So then it's like, how do we, instead of saying, you know what, this system is more efficient, potentially better education, and all of these things, but it doesn't meet these needs, instead of saying, well, how do we meet those needs in a real organized, thoughtful way? Instead, we're like, okay, well, we'll put them back into this other less efficient system, but more traditional. For work, same thing. So if your normal 8 hours day that you end up commuting on each end, which your friend Obs is talking about in the chat, and which you've also talked about, of commuting on the other end, the impact on the planet, the cost of the gas, the car, like all the things that goes along with that, and the time, and getting up and getting ready and getting out and all that kind of stuff. Then if we distill that down to how much time it really takes to do the task at hand, then do we look at that and say that has a lot more efficiency to it,
Hmm.
and potentially even good things trickling out of that in life? Like, I've heard so many people online talking about, i I love working from home and my kids are home, so we eat lunch together,
Hmm.
we do this together, we do that together. I'm able to pop the chicken in the oven in between clients, so that when I'm done for the day, dinner's made. Like, there's
Hmm.
none of that craziness, that, not none, because that can still happen. But I speak from experience. But having the possibility of that happening a few nights a week, of being able to say really what I think it boils down to, because I know we're getting out of time, and I could just go in 5 million directions with all of this, and I know you could too. Is that, and I've said this about COVID even a year ago plus, is that I think one of the byproducts of it, certainly am not happy that it's happened. It's impacted so many things, and so many people have lost their lives, and so many people are long COVID and sick. And I mean, I'm not wishing it on us at all. But if it had to happen, one of the byproducts, I think, has been, for many, a reevaluation and restructuring of priorities
Hmm.
and direction. And I don't want us as a humankind to lose that. I hope that we can learn from that and really restructure things and say, well, these things of the traditional, that works, that's great, and we need to retain that because there's so much value in that, and these other things, not so much.
Hmm.
And how can we do better, and for the generations coming? And I'm really hoping that the generations that are coming, that we and who are already growing now, are people who are going to be impacted in these ways by what we've been going through, so that they can have a different cause and direction and motivation in their life.
Yeah, it's really interesting looking at what Obs is saying, and then of course Ashley, and uh, especially what Obs is saying. I think is fascinating, a concept to think about. I know they ran a study somewhere in the Midwest. I heard it at like an educational conference years ago, but he's saying the idea of like 1.5 to 2 days per week of hands-on and social aspects. I know there's a school district, a couple of them out here, where we're at, where once after the pandemic, some of the high schools, what they're doing now is Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is vastly different. So Monday they go to periods like 1, 3,
Mhm.
and 6, and then Tuesday it's what is it, 2, 4,
The
and
other.
and 7. What? Yeah. So basically 3 periods a day, and they're going for like 2 hours each class,
Yep.
and I love it for a lot of reasons. One, I think it helps the students and the teachers because I always felt sitting, the unfortunate part is Wednesday they have to go to all their periods and it's like a 50-minute period. That was like our, normal when we were going through high school. And I hated it because it was like you're just being regurgitated, just all this information just throwing at you. And by the end of the day, you're just like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I just want to throw all this out of me and go to bed. It's like you get 20 minutes real fast to try and grade an assignment, any questions, and then here's the next subject, boom, here's your homework, get out the door, you go to your next class, and you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? And you just
Right.
get thrown through classes that way. But now I love it because it's like they can do 1 hour of instructional, then they take a small break, and then they have the rest of it. It's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what college is. We're starting to prepare kids in high school for what college periods and courses will look like, where you have a couple for 2 hours a day, and that homework you can work on the next day, you can work that same day, whatever it is. It's not due until you see that teacher again, Wednesday or Friday, whatever it is, if it's a Monday class, right? And the teachers, I'm sure, have to really enjoy it too because they can take their time. They can really explain things, like they're not rushed to have to push through all these benchmarks and everything. So it is such a fascinating experience. But the one in the Midwest that I was talking about was they basically gave people like instructional period, and then in between the instructional period, they gave them like 2 or 3, kind of free hours to go do exercise stuff.
Hmm.
Whether they wanted to go walk out on the field or spend time with their friends or go play, basketball, whatever it is, it was like just free play, and they actually found that those kids had higher test scores than the surrounding, school districts that were doing the traditional model. And so the idea is, yeah, like the social aspect, the hands-on, but also just the idea that you can have a break is really huge. And I agree with Obs. Like, I mean, personally, how great would it be for kids to be able to go to school and have like just knock out that Wednesday day, get out of that Wednesday day instead of having the 50-minute instructional period, and give them that Wednesday day to just go to school and have fun, right? Like go do something. School, you're there for 8 hours or whatever, and the school just offers all kinds of different social like experiences, like workshops or whatever it is, right? And just give them some fun. Like it would be real interesting to see that as like a study. I think
Give them fun, give them the opportunity to do some of the hands-on
yep.
things. Um, all giving any sort of presentation or those kinds of things that are still skill building,
Mm-hmm.
and have the social aspect, have that hands-on. I think the whole educational system needs to be just redone. Probably won't happen in my lifetime, hopefully it does. But if we think how education started, certainly there were people who wanted children to be educated and
Mm-hmm.
taking them out of the labor force, right? The little
Mm-hmm.
kids in the factories and things like that, on the fields, and not learning how to read and all of those things. Certainly all of that. But then on top of it's a place to put your kids, to deal with them for X number of hours a day, and you can get your work done too, right? And I think that structure, when we look at it historically, had its place, but it doesn't mean it has it now. And now, with all the further understandings we have about development and about education and learning and memory and need for all kinds of things, including play, it's important for us to start looking at incorporating all of that
Mm-hmm.
in a different way, I think.
Yeah, it'd be real interesting. I think like think of like a remote, kind of education, or even if I was at school and I know because I mean I grew up playing sports, so naturally I loved movement and exercise and competition was really fun. So mixing in competition doesn't have to be against other students. Like that's why I love gaming so much. I much more prefer what they would say like PVE, which is like player versus environment. So you're going against, NPC controlled characters. And so you're teaming up with real people going against, the computer essentially. Um, I prefer, that like competition as opposed to direct, going against other people, just especially if it's like a physical thing, just because, I always grew up playing like Mortal Kombat with, kids in my neighborhood and whatnot. And uh, while I would say most people were pretty good, sometimes it was pretty like disheartening for some that would lose and people would talk trash and all that kind of stuff and take it too far and everything, so I like the idea of like working together. That's why I love sports so much. But imagine if PE classes had VR headsets where they're all sitting there competing, trying to actually do something together. I mean, you probably would have more kids exercising than they would if they were having to walk outside or run a mile, because they don't. They just
Right.
walk.
Right. So, what are you going to do about all this, Michael?
Well, I hope that I'm excited for the generation coming up. Even after me, right? I think that like a lot of them are very much so into the idea of, you know, um, just caring about obviously, growing up for me, it's always been like, how do we leave what we were inherited better for the next generation behind us? And people don't have to be religious, or if they are, like, it doesn't matter, like, even if you are, you aren't. But I think the idea is like, how do we just make the world a better place for the present and also the future?
Mhm.
And circling back with our whole discussion, I do think that there is going to be a lot of implications of the metaverse for helping people in social experiences. And we talk about, obviously Facebook and Meta and stuff. They're not going to be the only one. I mean, metaverse is not just one. Every company is going to race to make their own, and and so it'll be crazy at the beginning, but it'll settle down. And I
Like
do think,
everything else.
yeah, as much as we all get very upset and concerned about these companies that are get jumping into it, and there will be some bad stuff definitely that'll come from it, but I think there's going to be a lot of good that's going to come from it, and a lot of opportunities to expand upon. And just like
Yeah.
life, right? Everything in life is going to have some bad and a lot of good.
That's what we hope for.
Right.
Yeah. And at some point the pendulum swinging settles somewhere in between. It might
Yeah.
go, whoa, way so far on one side, and then swing back far to the other side, and then come in the middle. And that's part of what, um, I think we've been talking about is, let's let's have these conversations so the swing to other side isn't quite so extreme,
Hmm.
that we can come in a more thoughtful way to somewhere in the middle.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Just bringing more of that awareness and understanding for people on a simplistic level, and on a level that's not extreme one way or the other. We're not totally for it. We're not totally against it. We're saying, how can we properly and ethically and morally use it for good?
yes, and with that, I'm happy to session.
All
But
right. Have a good
lovely
week,
conversation.
everyone. We'll see you next Sunday,
Yes. Bye
and have
bye.
fun at your conference. We can't wait to hear.
Thank you. I'll let you know.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.